Okay, so a 30-year-old woman comes in and states that she recently has been fainting multiple times a day, and each episode is preceded by confusion and irritability. Symptoms are improved after eating sugar, and she has also noticed bone pains, abdominal pain. Labs show glucose of 20 and calcium of 13. What is the cause? So we have A, multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1, B, multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2A, C, insulinoma, or D, insulin overuse. So I'll let you answer the question and then I'll explain in 5 seconds. Okay, so the answer is going to be A, multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1, or otherwise known as MEN type 1. And so for this one, so the thing about MEN 1 is it's a conglomeration of different problems. So the first problem is actually going to be insulinoma, which is tricky because insulinoma is also a answer choice. And so that's how this question's a little bit tricky, because if you quickly recognize the pattern that you have someone that's fainting and then it's preceded by these episodes of confusion, irritability, and improves with sugar, you're going to jump for C. But then the key here is that there's a hypercalcemia element. So this calcium's elevated. So that's what gives it away that it's not just C. And so in this case, we have an insulinoma. And so let's talk a little bit about that first. And so that's going to consist of the Whipple triad. So we're going to start off with hypoglycemia, which this patient does have at the glucose of 20. And so next we have CNS dysfunction, which she also has with the confusion and irritability. And then finally, we have improvement after glucose, which once again fits this. So this patient actually has Whipple's triad, and so we can start suspecting insulinoma. And then, like I was saying, this is keyed in that it's not insulinoma only, it's actually something else, so it must be MEN type 1 because of the hyperparathyroidism, which is going to cause her other symptoms as well. So it's going to cause the hypercalcemia, and so that's going to actually trigger the other problems like the nausea and constipation, and also polyuria. So something to remember with MEN type 1 is the 3 Ps, so it's going to be parathyroid, pituitary, and pancreatic tumors. So in this case, we have this, right? We have the parathyroid problem. And so another thing is, just the insulinoma, if you had chosen it, it's not associated with hypercalcemia. So that's why it can't be the answer on its own. It has to be associated with MEN type 1. And so going over the other answer choices, we have MEN type 2A. So we have medullary carcinoid thyroid, which is associated with type 2A pheochromocytoma and parathyroid tumor. So in this case, you could kind of think about pheochromocytomas because they kind of have these weird episodic episodes of hypertension, flushing, headache. But this patient didn't really have those things, and they didn't give you that clue, for example, of having very high blood pressure or anything else to suggest that it was going to be MEN type 2A. And the other thing is, even though it does have a parathyroid problems, this one is associated with insulinomas. So it's almost like the reverse problem. We have, this takes care of the hypercalcemia part, but it doesn't take care of the insulinoma type symptoms and the low glucose. And then finally, we have insulin use. So if you use too much insulin or they're hiding the fact that they're using too much insulin, what you can do is measure a C-peptide. So insulin is packaged with C-peptide. So when it's cleaved, C-peptide is the byproduct of having insulin release. So if you have endogenous insulin, such as from an insulinoma, you're actually going to have increased C-peptide because it's coming from an internal source. So every time that insulin is being produced, it's going to create C-peptide as a byproduct. However, if you're just using regular old insulin from the pharmacy, that one is just pure insulin, so it's not going to have that byproduct. So in this case, it's going to have actually decreased C-peptide. And this is something that they love testing because you have to remember that about this little fact. And so going back to this question, we essentially had to recognize the clinical presentation of someone having episodic hypoglycemia and Whipple's triad in general to discover that this patient has an insulinoma, and then make sure that we're not missing anything, and we see that she's having additional symptoms, and the real giveaway is having that calcium elevation. And so that clues us in that it's A as the answer. So I hope that helped, and thanks for watching.